Today we're talking about Colombia, but not only between ourselves. We have two special guests who are going to give us some inside information on this fascinating country. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello, my name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And with nearly 50 years of teaching English between us, Reza and I are going to help you grow your grammar, vocalize your vocabulary, and perfect your pronunciation. How are you doing, Reza?
I'm doing really well. I'm enjoying the slightly fresher weather. It's invigorating.
It is. It's wonderful weather here in Valencia, Spain. And today we're speaking with Angelica and Lina, our two guests who were born in Colombia but now live in Spain. But before we speak to our guests, Reza, let's speak about some facts about Colombia. The first thing is the pronunciation.
Yes, Colombia. It depends if you're saying it in English or Spanish, I guess. I know in Spanish it's, forgive my bad pronunciation, but something like Colombia. Is that more or less right?
That's how I would say it, Colombia.
Yeah. But in English we tend to say Colombia. So that second O, we pronounce it different to the first O. But that shouldn't surprise any of our listeners because you can really do whatever you want with the pronunciation of English vowels. There are no fixed rules. Yeah, so it's C-O-L-O. Yeah, but it doesn't sound like that. It sounds almost as if it's with a U, doesn't it, Craig?
It does, and that's the mistake I used to make. I used to say Colombia until a Colombiano corrected me. So now I know.
I guess the most important thing is don't spell it the wrong way. So if you're speaking in English and you say Colombia, okay, that's not a big deal in English, but don't write a U, write C-O-L-O-M. Do you know why people often make the mistake and they write that U?
Why is that?
It's because in many things in the United States and in Canada are Columbia something. So they've got C-O-L-U-M. I guess just the British and then later the Americans ended up writing it that way. Mm-hmm. But that's not the correct way to write the country. Yeah, Columbia University in America with a U, British Columbia in Canada with a U, but this lovely country in South America is O-O, Colombia.
Colombia. And before we hear from our guests, here are some facts. So Colombia has the Caribbean Sea to the north and shares borders with Panama, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela, and Brazil. And we have the Pacific Ocean to the west of Colombia. What about the population, Reza?
The population, I think, is just under 50 million, maybe about 48 million.
And 8 million people, more or less, live in the capital city, Bogotá.
And speaking of Bogotá, our first guest is Angelica, and she comes from Bogotá. And regular listeners of the podcast, AIRC, that's AIRC, not alcoholics, AIRC, know that Angelica has been helping us with our transcriptions for the Patreon supporters of this podcast. So a big thank you to Angelica for all her help.
That's right, and it was a pleasure to jump on Skype with her and chat a little about her home country. Now, I know she's listening, so hello, Angelica. We hope everything's going well for you over there in London with your new job.
I was born in Bogota. I am a biologist, so I did study in Bogota. So when I graduated, I did work for the university 1 year or so, but I wanted to go and study abroad. So I always wanted to do that. I was in a short stay in the UK in the year 2000. So I liked the country and I liked the area of biology in England. You know, in England, you have like the technology and also the history, you know. For any biologist, I think England is a reference. I decided to go there and to do my postgrad studies in England. So I was there for 6 years, and later this vacancy turned up in Spain. So I came to Spain in the year 2009.
So what was it like growing up in Bogota?
Well, it was very interesting. It was at different times. It was the 80s, the 90s. It was an interesting city, a lot of culture, I must say. The radio stations were spectacular, were very nice. For example, the university life as well, very lively. And also you have, all the settings of any Latin American city, all inequality, the political situation is always very unstable, the family ties are very strong usually. So it's like a mix of many things.
There's one thing I must ask you because it's kind of like for me, I feel like it's the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is the big thing that people may be wanting to know because it was 91 or the early 90s that was really, really dangerous in Colombia. I don't know
Yeah,
if
yeah,
it was, especially in cities like Medellin, were you conscious of that? Were you aware of that when you were growing up, or was it something that was happening in a different part of the country and it didn't affect you?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question because almost all the civil war that was going on in Colombia, I watched it through the TV. I watched the news and you could see how difficult was in different parts. But of course, the countryside was more affected than cities. Of course, in the cities, you saw the people coming from the countryside and poor people without any opportunity, probably just escaping from a bad situation in the countryside because of the violence and all of that. So you could see like a side of it, but growing up in the city and, sometimes you didn't realize about the impact of that. Of course, when you had like bombs everywhere and violence and, it was very obvious. And sometimes, you have schoolmates coming with bodyguards, that sort of
Yeah.
a difficult situation for them because it was very normal at school. It wasn't like for particular part of society or something. It was a very normal school, but still people that their parents work for the police, they arrive with bodyguards sometimes, things like that. You saw some things, but still was okay to go outside. Of course, you had the violence that wasn't related with the bombs and with mafia. Also the poverty, that we have had always in the country. It's like the 90s violence plus the poverty and inequality that we have had from the beginning, I think. So it's a mix of many things. But yes, I was aware, but I didn't suffer it.
And what's it
Yeah.
like these days? I mean, obviously you have family there. I think you went back recently. How do you feel when you go back? Do you feel comfortable?
Yes, I do because of my family, but still is very unsafe. For example, in Europe, you can go anytime. Usually, you can go anytime outside in the evening. You can walk on your own, and no one. Usually, people don't stop you to say stupid things. When they see you are a woman walking on your own. Yeah, some differences. The macho culture, of course, is still there. Little things, and also contamination as well was a big issue now that I was in Colombia in September. Bogota is terribly contaminated now. I was surprised because I noticed that 24 hours, I was waking up and all this diesel smell everywhere. Traffic is chaotic. But yeah, in terms of violence, I think it's better, but still it's difficult in Colombia nowadays in terms of people that is struggling to get land in Colombia, in the countryside as usual. In the cities, sometimes we can live like in Miami, that you don't realize about the real situation that most of the population has to face every day. Plus, there are no jobs for young people, plus inequality, plus corruption, all those things. We are so used to it that we just are used to it, and we don't. Yeah, it's like normal, that if someone steals money, it's like, it's normal, It's,
And you've been living abroad for quite a few years. What do you miss about life in Colombia?
I do miss my family. That's the most important thing. I think people.
Yeah.
basically, because, food, of course, but, you have wonderful food abroad as well. Also, to have conversation in Colombian, it's different when you talk to your people. Your speech changes a lot, and you feel more comfortable. People understands you. First thing you say something, you don't have to repeat, you don't have to make an effort. It's very easy, I think. And to be close to people, definitely.
You mentioned the food, Angelica. What's changua? And do you have it for breakfast in Spain? Can you describe it? Changua.
Well, I haven't seen that in Spain, to be honest. Maybe it is served somewhere. I haven't seen it. And changua, well, that's an interesting question, actually. I don't like it to start,
Really?
but my family loves it. It's a sort of soup. It's a soup that you prepare with milk, water, bread. When you have bread that is like going off, so you put it in the soup, and it's great for many people. And you put egg. The egg is very important for the consistency, and sometimes you put some coriander sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different ways to make it, but that's what I remember from the ingredients. And that's typical in Bogota for breakfast, of course. In towns, it's so typical. Yeah. Many people love
It's a hot soup, yes?
It's a hot soup.
Okay.
Yeah. And you see like the bread floating around. I'm not a big fan.
If you're not a fan of that, what about bandeja paisa?
Oh, I love it. I mean, it's quite heavy, it's very rich dish. I don't know if you have tried in Valencia or somewhere in
I
Spain.
haven't, but can you describe it for people? Because I don't think Spanish people know what that is.
Bandeja paisa is basically from the area of Medellin, Antioquia. Paisa is what you call people from Medellin and Antioquia area. So bandeja paisa is from that area. So it's quite heavy. It's like a sort of, I think it should have origins in the countryside, sort of big plates, full of food. It's beans, and you have chicharrón. Chicharrón is like the skin of the pork skin.
Mm-hmm.
And also you have avocado, and also you have rice.
Wow.
And you have pork meat as well.
And sausages,
and
maybe?
No sausages.
No
I don't know
sausages. Okay.
if no, I don't remember any sausages, but also it's pork based basically, and it has fried plantain. So can you imagine, the amount of calories that thing, and also arepa, of course. So, it's a very heavy dish, if you eat that thing, you can just be like for a week without eating anything, because
if you
so
eat
heavy.
that, you'll be able to go out and work all day without any problems. You have enough calories in your body to work for the whole day.
Probably to sleep the whole day, because after that you will be knocked down, I think. Yeah, but it's very rich, and nutritiously it's okay, and it has egg as well, fried egg. I'm just remembering more ingredients, but it's quite heavy. I mean, in terms of calories, it's massive.
So, for anyone visiting Colombia, is there any other food that you would recommend they try when they go to your country?
Well, I was quite pleased to know that there are new places and new restaurants where they make fuse, for example, food from the Pacific area that is delicious. It has coconut, it has fresh fish, and, a lot of vegetables as well. Delicious. I mean, the food from the Pacific area of Colombia is very nice, and you can find it in different cities now, in Bogota, for example. The food from the North Coast as well is very nice, based on fish, on seafood, and also, well, the food from Bogota is my favorite, because I grew up with that food,
Yeah.
but I know that can be quite heavy for people that is not used to it, because it's based on maize, and maize, not everyone is used to maize, so for some people it's quite heavy, especially people that is more into wheat, for example, as Europeans are. I mean, the food from the coast for me is quite exotic still, because I'm from the interior. So, yeah,
Right.
Potatoes, of course, the papas criollas, a sort of small potatoes, yellow. They're delicious. Yeah, very nice.
Sounds lovely. I can't wait to go and try those. Moving on to things that tourists might enjoy about your country, can you tell us about Caño Cristales, and have you been there?
Yes, I was there in Caño Cristales. That was, I think, the year 2001 or two. And it was beautiful because I went for fieldwork as a biologist. I was at the university, so I had to go there for an ecology course or something like that. That was very interesting, very beautiful. The forest there is amazing, the landscape. But unfortunately, the conflict was quite. There were problems there. There were mines around the area, so we couldn't explore as much as we wanted to because it was plenty of mines around and also coca fields. We saw just in the distance a lot of coca fields, and the problem with those
To make cocaine.
crop. Yeah, to make cocaine.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the problem with those plantations was that, of course, they have to get rid of a lot of forest.
Yeah.
So, it was plenty of the same similar small trees, and all the forest was completely destroyed around it. And also the places where they produce cocaine, they are awful places. They call them laboratories, but I'm afraid they are not laboratories. They are it's like they are awful places where people work in terrible conditions and
And I suppose they're
contamination of
guarded.
the water.
I suppose
Yeah, of
they're
course.
guarded by men
Yeah,
with guns as well, so you won't want to
yeah.
go very close to those. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you saw that thing in the distance. The person that was guiding us, he was one of them, because that was the reason that we could go that close, because otherwise, so you had to ask permission. So it's beautiful, but you have around such a conflict. So you like jewels in the middle of the forest, very beautiful landscapes, but it was very difficult at the time. I think now it's a bit better with the peace process and all of that, but still the coca crops are growing and growing. So
So
ecologically, it's a disaster as well. It's not just in terms of health or in terms of policies or international fight against the drug, but it's mainly ecological. Yeah.
Sure. So obviously, a tourist who visits Colombia, that you have to be very careful which areas to go to. What other places would you recommend tourists to visit in the country?
I would recommend to visit the areas where you had the farms where coffee grows, the La Zona Cafetera, they call the areas where you have, like in the Central Cordillera, it's another sort of landscape, it's
Mhm.
around the coffee fields and how people live there. And I think it's a nice tour. I haven't been myself, but everyone is so pleased when they go because they can see like the small towns, how people live there, and you can see where coffee is produced. And it's a culture around that. It's not just the landscape, it's just like all the culture around it. Yeah, I think it's beautiful.
Have you ever played tejo?
Oh yes, I did, because my dad loved it.
Can you
My dad.
describe? Because I didn't know what it was. I was doing some research and I read about it on the internet. How do you play? What is it and how do you play it?
Well,
Because it's Colombia's national sport, isn't it?
oh yeah, of course. For as my mom would say, like for lazy people, people that has not doing their lives, so they go and play tejo. Because usually the places where you go and play that, they are like very rundown bars. It's like a sort of countryside typical place where you go to drink, and
Yeah.
usually everyone goes there. It's not a place like it's like
So you
fancy
have
at
to
all.
drink when you play it. Is that true? You should
Oh
drink
yes,
beer
of
while you
course. So
play
there was otherwise it wouldn't work. So it's basically just to hit something that has pólvora. How do you say that?
it.
When you have
Gunpowder,
gunpowder,
like
exactly.
explosive gunpowder.
Exactly. So it's like darts, but you have like a thing that you just put there. I mean, you have to be like 10 meters away or something like that.
Mhm.
So I don't remember very well, but I haven't played for years. But it's basically to hit the gunpowder, and it's the
It
smell of it.
It sounds very dangerous mixing gunpowder that could explode with beer. That doesn't sound a good mixture to
Yeah.
me.
But not a big explosion. Yeah, it's a small thing. It's not dangerous, but I mean, that thing can go into your eye, if you are very close, or for sure there have been accidents, but it's quite fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun. Can you think, Angelica, of any unusual or surprising facts about Colombia that listeners may not know, especially for listeners in Spain or other parts of the world?
Well, it was quite interesting. For example, in the colony times in Colombia, course, there was an Indian population living in Colombia, different groups in the coast, in the center, in different areas. I mean, it wasn't as strong as in Peru or Mexico. So they were very small groups. I mean, the population wasn't big. They communicate between each other, but the population wasn't as big as you can think that, in Colombia, probably the indigenous population was could be, like similar to Peru or similar to Mexico with all the biodiversity around there. But now basically they were like not many. So that was a factor that could help the Spaniards to get the control, because with the disease and with all of that, but they weren't like strong groups like many in order to combat what happened when the Europeans came. But still there were like different groups, but not many as you could think, because the country is very big.
I also read that Colombians think it's rude to say no. Is that true?
Depending on the region and depending on the context, I think, yeah. But yeah, usually you are not as direct as you can be in Spain, for example.
You find
So
Spanish
you are,
people more direct in conversation?
yeah, people is not direct in conversation. That's not polite. I mean,
Okay.
as I grew up, I don't know these days, probably people, I mean, ways of speaking, it evolves quite quickly anyway. But yeah, it's very rude to be direct, to say no or to be, yeah, we are not used to it. Yeah.
Interesting. It's very interesting. Your English is absolutely wonderful. How old were you when you started learning English in Colombia?
Oh, thank you. Well, I didn't start in school, but with songs and things with play. And my mom, she did speak a bit of English. She's Colombian, but she did study languages, and she had a nice pronunciation. She loves the Beatles, so she always had music around her, and also Michael Jackson. The 80s. Had the and at school English was the subject. But, grammar, it was okay. But I mean, when I had to go to England, that was really hard because I didn't understand anything. So, I did learn English in Colombia, but actually to speak and to listening and speaking, I did learn it in England, definitely. When I had to face people speaking English and no Spanish was around, or I couldn't speak any Spanish.
When you first arrived in the UK, those first few weeks, how did you feel being in a country and not feeling comfortable with the language? And can you offer any advice to people who would be in a similar situation?
For me, it was panic, all the time, because I didn't want people to even approach me, because I knew a conversation was about to start. And, I just wanted to say, hi, hello, what are you doing here? For how long? Nice to meet you, bye. But after a while, you get used to it, you learn new words, you start to talk to people that you find like friendly and that chats to you, and you start like targeting people you feel comfortable with. I think that's one of the best. And also the worst thing for me was the phone, because sometimes they call, let's say, to a room, like this, the student's room, someone called and I was just next to it, unfortunately. And I had to, and I had to answer. And it was terrible because I didn't understand anything, not even the names, can I speak with so-and-so, I just I couldn't get the messages up to, like a year. It took me a year. But also, I think the advice I would give to someone that is like starting or is planning to go somewhere to speak another language independently, if it's English or German or Italian or whatever, is find someone someone native speaker you find comfortable with, always there is someone.
And you're going to the UK next month because of work, and you're making a permanent move there. Is that right? How are you feeling about that?
Well, I'm very
Obviously
excited.
a lot more confident with your English now.
Oh, well, yes, exactly. And also because I use quite a lot of technical English for my work. So I have to work in hospitals, for example. So it's a lot of technical words. But yeah, I have to use the phone a lot. For example, I had an interview with a Scottish girl. She was lovely, but oh Jesus Christ, it wasn't, it wasn't straightforward because, the accent, or when you speak with someone from India, from
Sure.
Africa, you're depending where people is. But yeah, I feel a bit more comfortable. But yeah, still you have to face people that is difficult to understand.
Well, I want to thank you very, very much for agreeing to have this interview, and also for the work you've done with the transcriptions over the last 2 years, Angelica. Thank you very, very much.
No, thanks to you, because I think what you do is just wonderful. You're doing this every week, teaching us wonderful things. I mean, that's wonderful. I think, as everyone says, all the listeners, when they give their feedback, that's the first thing they say, thank you, because I'm learning this, and it's fun. It's good fun as well.
Thank you. Okay, well, good luck in the UK, and please keep in touch.
Oh yeah, I will. I will let you know how it is. And well, if you go to the UK, or let me know, maybe we can have a beer or something. We can have a chat, and also Reza.
Okay, I'll tell him, and for sure we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, definitely.
Our friend Lina is also from Colombia, and we work together in a language school here in Valencia, Spain. Can we say the name? Are we allowed, Craig?
If you want to, they're not paying us, but
They're not paying us, no. They're not our sponsors, but we all work in the British Council together here in Valencia, Spain. How are you, Lina?
Hi, Reza. I'm very well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, Lina, let's find out a little bit about you for the listeners. Where were you born exactly?
Well, I was born in Bogota as well, the capital of Colombia.
Near the center or in the suburbs?
Well, I was born near the center, yeah. And I lived in Bogota, but it was like pretty near the suburbs afterwards.
And what was it like growing up in Bogota?
Well, I had a really good childhood. All my family is from there, most of them. So I had my family always near me. Yes, and I have a lot of friends. And also my grandparents had a farm like 2 hours away from Bogota. So I used to spend their weekends or holiday. It was really good.
When did you come to Spain?
I came to Spain 2 years ago.
So, how old were you when you came here?
Well, I was 28.
Okay, or maybe I shouldn't ask that.
Yeah.
my mom always says me never ask a woman her age. Yeah.
No, it's
I didn't
okay.
actually ask you your age, but I guess it's kind of come out now. My mom would be very annoyed.
No, it's okay. Actually, I look younger, so I don't have problems with that.
You do look a lot younger. Why did you decide to come here?
Well, it was because I'm married to an Englishman, and he was living in Colombia. We were living in Colombia together, and he really wanted to come back to Europe. I had never had the opportunity to come here before, so I thought it would be a really good idea. It would be easier because I was coming with him, and I just want to try it like that, an adventure to see what happens, really.
So did you make a permanent move here, or is it kind of a testing period to see if you like living in Spain?
Well, I think the testing period is ending and we are going to stay in Europe for a while. We are thinking maybe of going to UK for a while. And our plan is that we want to save money and one day go back to Colombia because we really like it.
So would you say it was more your husband's idea or your idea or a joint effort to come here?
It was a joint effort. Yeah. He had already lived here in Valencia, and I really understand why he wanted to come back because it's a beautiful city. And I really wanted to live abroad one day. So that's why I came.
You've got a very good level of English, as the listeners now know. They've been listening to you for a while and they think, wow, she speaks good English. We already know one of the reasons why. You've got an English husband. That obviously helps a lot. But what else did you do to get your English to such a high level?
Well, the most important thing is practice a lot. I do everything you can do in another language, starting from watching TV. Maybe if you need subtitles in that language as well, it could help. Read, that's very important. I still go to classes because my writing is not what I want it to be. So I'm still improving, and also I want to keep working on my pronunciation. But what I think that has helped me the most is, of course, my husband. But not just him, his family. Because my husband, he speaks Spanish and he speaks very well. So if I want to say something to him in Spanish, it's going to be okay because he's going to understand. But when I'm going to England and I have to spend time with his family, I really have to make an effort. And I think that's the best advantage that I've got.
So does your husband give you English classes? Because my wife is Spanish and we don't have patience for each other to teach each other.
Well, I want to tell you something. He's like really perfectionist. So sometimes we do argue about it. So it's if he say, like I said, I don't know, money is like, no, it's not money, it's money. And he started like that and I was like, okay, but you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So it's difficult sometimes, but it's useful. And I'm going to tell you something that it's, as he speaks Spanish very well, I tend to speak to him in Spanish and he speaks to me in English. And it's something that people find like weird, but it works for us.
No, that sounds like a really good idea. And what's more, that's really good exercise for your brain because you're translating. So you're practicing your listening and your pronunciation and translating. I think it's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, very, very good.
Have you got any other tips for our listeners to help them to get to such a high level as you have?
Well, maybe like I know that not everybody can have like a native English speaker partner. So there are exchanges places. So you could find someone who's native English speaker and maybe want to learn your language. There are websites or apps, so that could be very useful as well.
And by the way, just a question out of interest, the general level of English spoken by Colombians and Spaniards, who speaks English better in your opinion?
Well, about pronunciation, I think like South American people have an advantage because people in Spain have like a very strong way of speaking. And when they speak English, it's like they transfer that sound. We don't do it perfectly, but I think it helps the way that we speak in South America. But about the level, it's different. I've noticed here that people started learning since they are very young. And we kind of do it that way, but it's not like until we are at university or even after we finish university that we really start doing something like to get a B2 or a C2 level. Here in Spain, I've seen that it's different.
And do most Colombians want to speak like an American from the USA or a British person, or they don't have a preference?
Well, for me, that's been difficult because in Colombia, we have American English all the time. TV programs, films, everything is like that. So when I met my husband, it was quite difficult to change, like to adjust my hearing to the way he was speaking. And I feel that sometimes I'm still using the words that they use, or I tend to pronounce things the way they do. So in Colombia, it's more like American English, but because that's the influence that we've got.
But I can't hear an American accent when you... Can you hear an American accent?
No. Probably your husband has cancelled it out quite a bit.
Well, I mean, it's been 4 years, so I think that it's been changing.
It's a very neutral, very nice accent. It's not specifically American. It's not specifically British. It's something in the middle, and it's very nice.
I thank you so much.
Well, let's get down to talking more about you personally. So tell us, in your opinion, what are the main differences between Colombia and Spain?
Well, I have to say that one of the biggest difference is that the time of what everything happens here. So in Colombia, we have a pretty early start of the day. We have breakfast early, lunch early, finish working early. And here, everything is different. So you have a late start. When people have lunch here, I usually it's been like 2 hours after a Colombian would have had lunch.
Yeah, same in the UK, isn't it?
And it's pretty difficult for me sometimes, for example, if I'm going out with Spanish people to have dinner. Sometimes I have to confess that I eat something before because I can't wait until 10 or 11 p.m.
Or later at weekends, sometimes Friday and Saturday, they can eat at 12:30 at night.
Exactly.
Crazy.
And that's crazy for me. And yeah, that's one of the things that I think that are pretty different.
So you're not used to that?
No.
I wonder if that's got anything to do with geography. Now, I'm not an expert, but I think Colombia is fairly near the equator, or maybe is a part actually on the equator.
Yes, it is.
Right. So therefore, winter, summer, there's not much difference.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So that was going to be my second difference. So what happened there is that we are actually on the equator. So we don't really have seasons. It could be maybe that we have like raining season or dry season, but the temperature don't change during the year. And that is the same for the sunlight.
Right.
So we have light usually from 6 in the morning to 6 in the afternoon. It's the same all year round. It could change like 10, 20 minutes, but it's not like a huge difference like it is here in Spain, for example. And of course, life is just adapt on the light that we have during the day. So that's what everything happens earlier.
That's curious. You said there's not a huge difference like here in Spain. Have you ever been to Scotland?
Oh, yes, yeah. I went
Or
one summer.
Norway?
Yeah, but it's just because we were talking about Spain and Colombia, but yes.
For me in Spain, the difference isn't as extreme as my hometown, Belfast. There in summer, on the longest day, it's light until about 11:30 on the 21st of June. And then the sun comes up at about 3:30 in the morning, because it's very far north. So I guess that partly determines your routine. So everything starts early, finishes early, because kind of you know what daylight you're going to be getting.
Yeah,
And it's not
exactly.
going to change. Listen, don't get offended, but I'm going to tell you some common stereotypes that
Okay.
people have of Colombians. You tell me if you think they're true or not. The first one is, you all love dancing.
Well, I'm not really sure that all love dancing, but everybody has to dance. At least you have to know to do the basics. Because since you're little, like in family reunions, you have to dance with your aunts or with your mom or your grandmom. And even when you're growing up, when you're a teenager, if you're going to a party, that's the way that you meet like the girl that you like or the boy that you like. So it's really important in Colombian society to do that.
I have to ask, I can't resist. Is your husband a good dancer?
Well, he's not a bad dancer. Of course, he's from Europe, so it's pretty difficult for someone. I'm really sorry.
He's British. He's British. We understand it's very difficult for us.
But you know that I've seen some of his friends dancing. It's like, oh my God. But when I see Alex, that's his name, it's like, okay, he has rhythm, so it is not bad.
Okay, moving on. Another stereotype that I've heard, I've never been to Colombia, I just heard it, is that you don't like being rushed.
Well, I think like, for example, in a city like Bogota, where everything is pretty crazy and you have to do things quickly, that's true. But maybe what that comment is referring to is more like about the time that you could spend with people, that maybe we think like, I know that people have some obligations. But if you are with someone, it is important for a Colombian person to know that you are with that person, that you are important, for example, and they're going to spend the time that you really think that it's necessary. Or for example, if you're walking on the street and you see someone, like take at least a couple of minutes to say, hi, how are you? Something like that, not just keep going.
Right. You've kind of already answered my next question then. It's kind of related and it's a positive thing for sure. I heard that Colombians expect huge effort when they're doing a favor for someone, or they will give a huge amount of their time to another person. It's expected. So don't be surprised if you ask a Colombian, how do you get to the station? And they're going to bring you there. Is that a true stereotype?
Yes, it is.
But also you expect it in return?
Well, not always, but it can be kind of rude that if you need something and someone like doesn't help you.
I read also, Lina, that Colombians think it's rude to say no. Is that true?
Well, it is not rude, but we have problems saying no. Like we feel the obligation, like, would you like to come over? And if you don't want to go, it's like, well, I'm not sure. And we try like to make up some, to make excuse. Yes, it's difficult for us. And I think it's been changing, but it's difficult to say no in Colombia.
And what stereotypes do you Colombians have of first Spanish people and then British people?
Well, we think that it's like good weather all the time. I know that it's not like that in all Spain, but we could think like everybody's out drinking and eating.
On the beach,
on
every
the beach.
every day, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we also, before coming here, I thought like the food was really good. Like I imagine everybody having tapas and drinking sangria. That's what I imagine Oh, I used to imagine of a
You used
Spanish person.
So you've decided those stereotypes aren't true, in fact.
Well, for example, the weather. I know that it's not the same all in Spain. I know in the north it rains a lot.
What about the character of the average Spanish person? Are there any stereotypes about that in Colombia?
Yes, what Colombian people think about Spanish is that they don't tend to use like as many please or I'm sorry words as we do. And it's kind of difficult for me. I've realized that they don't think that's rude, but for me it's been a shock. Like if someone says something to me and I say like please or I'm sorry or thank you.
And does it bother you when they don't address you as usted so often?
No, not really. Actually, I don't like the usted thing. I prefer like just to. But another difference is that one, for example, the plural, I don't use vosotros.
What do you say?
I just use ustedes.
Ustedes.
Yes.
So this word vosotros, does it basically not exist in Colombia?
No, well, we learn it when we are at school. We learn how to conjugate verbs. Yes, with vosotros, but we never use it. We never use that word.
Craig, what about what Lena said about Colombians noticing that Spaniards don't say please and thank you? Do you notice that as a British person? I do, I must say.
Really?
Yeah, I noticed. And I've also noticed that Colombians say please and thank you more than Spanish people. As a British person, I've noticed that. You don't hear that many por favors and gracias.
That's true.
Compared to Colombians. They
true.
use it a lot more, I've noticed.
And Argentinians too.
Yeah. I've noticed that, I must say. I'm not saying Spanish people are rude. It's just not expected so much. I totally agree with Lena there.
Yeah, it's totally different to address to others, but that it's difficult to understand when you've been living your whole life saying por favor and thank you 1,000 times a day. So
I think you have to look at it in a positive way. It's a way of being intimate or close to someone in a way, and like saying to, like, I know you well, you're tú, not usted, and I don't need to say please to you. I kind of look at it like that. I turn it on its head and look at the positive side.
Yeah, no, I'm getting used to it, and I kind of like it, but at first it was difficult.
How do you see us British people?
You are very punctual. You do things that you have
Craig
to do
knows
on
this
time.
is true for me.
Some of us are.
Okay, but this is
not
a
all of us.
stereotype. I know that not everybody is like that.
Yeah, I am more like a what is it, payasa in that sense. More like someone from Medellin, maybe.
Yeah, and there's something about food. It's like that British food don't have a really good, don't expect that food is really good in your country. That's a stereotype as well.
Have you changed your mind about that since knowing your husband?
Yes, I do. It's like because I did just know fish and chips. It's like all that I could imagine of. But now that I spend time there, yeah, I like it. Like a nice roast dinner, for example. I like the gravy or, well.
Lovely.
Yeah, so no, I don't think that anymore.
Listen, we have to bring up a subject. What's Colombia like to travel these days? Because everybody knows that in the past there's been a lot of trouble in Colombia. Like, we got a statistic in 1991, there were on average 17 murders per day. Not in Bogota, in Medellin. So there were bad times in Colombia in the past, just like there were in my country, Northern Ireland. What's it like these days? Is it safe to travel?
Yeah, it's so much better now. There was a time that not even Colombians wanted to go out because it was dangerous for everybody. But now it's different. So you can go there. The only thing is you have to be careful. Before you go, you have to check where you can go, when is the best place to stay. It's not like if you come to some place in Europe, you can go everywhere. No, you have to check.
So you still have to be careful now when you travel as a tourist, where you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, just trying to stay on the touristic area. That's the most important thing. And be careful with the belongings, but I think that happens everywhere.
But what some people call the civil war, would you consider that there was a civil war in Colombia?
Yes, definitely.
Is it over? Is that civil war finished now?
Well, not really. We're going through a difficult moment now. Some of the groups that are going back to do that kind of stuff, and we have problems with our president. It's not a really good moment in Colombia, and no, the war is not over yet.
Okay. Well, looking at a totally different aspect, nature, I don't know if the listeners know that Colombia is the second most biodiverse country in the world. So, as regards nature, what places would you recommend tourists to visit in Colombia?
Well, I've made a list. I'm going to start from my favorite area of Colombia, and this is the coffee growing region. Why is my favorite one? Because it has the perfect weather all year round. It's green, it's absolutely beautiful. So if you go there, you can go to a coffee plantation, for example.
And which part is this? Which area?
This is like central west, more or less. It's not that far away from Bogota. Colombia is huge. So it's like 5-6 hours from Bogota, but that's close because Colombia is huge. Okay, so you can go there. There's a pretty beautiful city that is called Salento. And you can watch from that town the Cocora Valley. So we've got palm trees there. They are pretty high. And you cannot imagine, but it's a stunning view, really. And you can do hiking. It's about 5-6 hours, but it's absolutely beautiful.
And this area has coffee. So I'm guessing there are probably mountains, because doesn't coffee grow up high?
Yeah.
So it's mountainous.
Mm-hmm. But you have mountains everywhere. Okay, that's one of the places that I really recommend to go. And of course, to the cities that are there, like Pereira or Armenia, they're really good. Also, I have another place that is called Caño Cristales. This is a river, okay? This is more in the south. And what is exciting about this river is that it has a plant in it, and it makes the river look red, green, blue. It's called the River of the Five Colors.
I heard about this. I read about this on the internet. Yeah, it's because of the plants in the river, and it looks like it's the colors of the rainbow. It's all different colors.
Yes,
Wow.
It's absolutely beautiful. People should go there, definitely. It's important that there's just 6 months of the year in which the river looks like it. So it's important to check before going there if you want to see it.
That's a good tip.
Mm-hmm. That's another one. Also, for those who really love like jungle or things like that, we have Amazon as well. 10% of the Amazon forest is in Colombia, so that's another option for people. And also we have the places where we have the beaches. The most beautiful one for me is San Andres. It's an island up north. It's pretty near Nicaragua.
Okay, so it's a beach area for sunbathing or...
Yeah, it's a pretty small island, so you can rent a buggy and go around the island in just one morning. So it's pretty interesting.
Very cool. Sounds great. Lina, Colombia's also part of the Ring of Fire. I was wondering if you've ever experienced any earthquakes or tsunamis when you were living there.
Well, I experienced some, but it just like some of low magnitude.
Just gentle shakes or something?
Yeah, but it's pretty frequent. When I was working in Colombia, I used to work on an 11th floor. And when that happened, like everything moved, and it was frequent.
How did you feel when that happened?
Pretty dizzy and scared.
Yeah.
It's a pretty scary situation. But the one that I remember the most, it was like 25 years ago. I was pretty little, but it was actually in Armenia, near Armenia, the coffee growing region. And it was pretty strong and destroyed more of that area. And also talking about that, because it's not just earthquakes and tsunamis, the other problem with that is like volcanoes. And we had also a pretty bad situation like 30 years ago in Colombia with a volcano which destroyed a whole town.
So there was an eruption?
Yes.
Okay, moving away from nature and going back to the towns and cities a bit. As you know better than me, Lina, there's a lot of rivalry between Bogota, your city, the capital, and Medellin. Very strong rivalry. And there's a stereotype, I don't know if it's true, but there's a stereotype that people in general from busy, big capital cities like London, Paris, places like that, they seem to have less time for people and they're more like down to business compared to people from provincial towns or cities. Is that true also for Colombia? So are you Rolos from Bogota? Are you a bit busier and a bit more business-like than the paisas from Medellin?
I think people have that perception of Rolos is because Bogota is a massive city. It's pretty difficult to move around. So we have to do things quicker, maybe, than a paisa in Medellin. But that doesn't mean that we don't spend quality time with people or that we are just focused on business. It's not like that. And also, like, if that perception is true, it would be like pretty weird because paisas, they are very successful business people. So no, there are a lot of, like, the biggest economic groups in Colombia are from the Medellin or those areas. So I do not agree with that.
But is there a genuine rivalry?
Well, I've heard about that a lot, but while I'm living there, I don't really feel it. It was more some years ago because we had a president who was from Medellin, and who was paisa. And maybe that like us like that rivalry.
And what about the third biggest city, Cali, which is also a very famous city? What's that like? And of the three cities, which one do you prefer?
Well, when I think about Cali, all I can think of is salsa, dancing salsa. Yes, I think it's kind of different. It's more like it's more relaxed. I imagine life there more relaxed, maybe.
Have you spent a lot of time there? Did you used to visit when you lived in Colombia?
I went there 3 or 4 times because at the beginning of the year, they do like a festival, salsa. So I used to go there because it's just kind of fun.
Yeah?
Yes.
The paisas, I believe, are very proud of their climate. They say it's the land of eternal spring.
Yes.
They say their climate's much better than Bogota's. Is it true?
Yes, it is true. I can't argue with that. Yeah, the climate in Bogota is not really good. It's pretty cold in the morning, and during the day it could rain. It could be very hot, so it's pretty difficult to even know what you're wearing every day.
Who has the best football team?
I don't really know anything about football, so I don't really... Maybe, Reza, I don't know if you find...
I don't know anything about football except I just checked. I did a bit of research on the internet, and if the information I read is correct, the biggest rivalries are within the cities. So it's not between Medellin and Cali and Bogota. It's the two teams in Bogota hate each other.
Like Manchester City and Manchester
United, Liverpool, Everton. The two teams in Cali hate each other.
Yeah.
The two teams in Medellin hate each other. That's what I heard.
As an Arsenal supporter from London, I totally understand that. So, Lino, what things do you miss about Colombia? Living now in Spain for how many years have you
2
been
years.
here? Is there anything particular that you miss about your country?
Well, of course, my family, my friends. Well, there's something that I do miss. And it's, for example, a birthday there at work. Everybody do a lot of things, like they decorate the place where you're sitting on, or they give you a lot of things. They treat you to breakfast, lunch, dinner, and even though they are not your closest friends. So I do really miss that a lot. Because here in Spain, what I've seen is, like, for example, when it's your birthday, you bring something to the place you work,
Exactly.
like to share with others. And for me, it's so
I don't
weird.
understand that. And if you go out for a meal with your friends, you are expected to pay in
Yes,
Spain. But in the
yes,
UK, people pay for you.
Well, it's the same in Colombia. Yeah, and I do miss it. It's like make other person feel special.
Exactly.
So I do miss that a lot.
Come on, Spain, let's change this custom. If it's your birthday, then you should be treated.
I bet you miss some food from your home country, don't you?
Yes, of course.
What's your favorite Colombian food?
Well, I have to say that what I miss the most is the variety of fruits that we've got. That's very important for me. For example, when you go out to eat in a restaurant in Colombia, you have a different choices of natural juices to drink. And oh my God, you cannot imagine how much I miss that.
I love a natural fruit juice. When I have time, I try and make myself one every morning. But I bet there's so much more variety, and it must be so much cheaper in Colombia.
Yeah,
than in
yes,
Europe.
it's cheaper. And
I would love that.
you can have something different for 2 weeks and you're not going to repeat. It's amazing. That's what I miss the most.
Do you miss arepas?
But I can have arepas here and I make my own arepas, so no, not really.
What do you fill them with? Or do you have toppings?
Well,
Ooh, the big question.
that's a big question. Well, I think that depends. Because if the arepas thing is not really easy to put something inside. And that's maybe, for example, there are arepas that are called arepas paisas, which are very thin. So it is not really easy to put something inside. So we usually put something on the top. Okay. But when are thicker, we can put something inside. And I use just like with beef or chicken. Like I try to make something like what my mom would make.
I was looking forward to your answer about that because I know that Colombians are rightly very proud of their arepas, but so are Venezuelans.
Yes.
And I know, Craig, you've been in Venezuela. Can you remember there if their arepas tended to be filling or topping?
They tended to be filling and they were absolutely wonderful. And I really do miss them. So I'm looking forward one day to going to Colombia and tasting Colombian arepas.
Just one last question for you, Lina. Are there any surprising facts about Colombia that maybe listeners don't know?
I found something like we are the world's largest producer of emeralds.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yes.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and if you go to the city center, there are people there just like trading the emeralds. It's actually pretty cool. And something that it's also that, I don't know if we should be proud of this, but we have 18 bank holidays all over the year, which is a pretty high number.
I will be proud of that. Well, that's all we have time for. Lina, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And now it's your turn to practice your English. Are you from Colombia? We'd love to hear from you if you have any comments about this episode. And if you don't have any comments, why don't you just get in touch, say hi, and maybe give us an idea for a future episode. We'd love to hear from you. Reza, how can people get in touch via voicemail?
Well, the best way we think is to leave your voice message with speakpipe.com/English podcast. Don't be shy. Leave a voice message.
And if you'd like to contact us by email, you can reach me, Craig, Craig, at inglespodcast.com.
Or me, belfastreza@gmail.com.
And if you're interested in online courses, there's a website called mansioningles.com that has some very interesting courses for sale. Go to store.mansioningles.net. And before we go, thank you to all our wonderful patrons who are supporting the podcast for transcription purposes. If you would like to see a full transcription of this episode, you can join our Patreon program for a minimum of $1 per month, and you get instant access to these transcriptions. Go to Patreon, patreon.com/English podcast. Join us next week for something that we have no idea what it's going to be. Thank you very much for listening this week. Thank you to Lina, thank you to Angelica, and Reza, thank you to you.
And thank you to Craig.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.